Good morning. Good morning from the parsonage living room yet again. We're in week 2 of our second week of being reclosed, and hopefully, Lord willing, and no more outbreaks amongst us, we will reopen next Sunday, 9:30 at Hoxie, 11 at Walnut Ridge, and slightly after 11 here on the live broadcast. But it's good to be with you this week. I took last week off to kind of see how things were going with me, and things went fine. But next week, when we do come back together in person, I do ask you to please follow all of the guidelines that we've talked about for so long. And I ask you to read what we will put out in the newsletters again this week and familiarize yourself with all of the things that we require, because it's very important to prevent another outbreak. We do have a few announcements today. Next week is going to be very busy for me, especially. We will have 2 leadership team meetings next week, but they have different times. So please note, Hoxie will meet at 1 o'clock at the fellowship hall, the leadership team, and Walnut Ridge will meet at 3 o'clock at the fellowship hall at Walnut Ridge. That is the leadership team. I have a charge conference that afternoon, so I have to get our meetings out of the way so I can have this charge conference. And then our charge conference will be the following Sunday. It'll be November 1st at 1:30, and it will be via Zoom. So if you are interested in participating, and I hope some of you are, or if you want to just watch and see what's going on, let me know. Call the office and tell Sharon, and that way I'll know to send you a link to Zoom when I get that link later this week. Now, speaking of Sharon, she tested negative this week. Thank God. After being exposed to me the week before, she tested negative this week. And even though she is still needing to isolate, she will be in the office this next week, starting tomorrow, Monday through Thursday, 9 to 3. So if you need to go up there, please wear a mask and please maintain your distance from her, because she is still isolating just because of her exposure to me. So, okay. Also, you know that I don't normally broadcast prayer requests or anything each Sunday morning because I don't always know who wants their request. But I do want to bring one thing to your attention. We did lose one of our Hoxie saints this past week, and I want you to keep her family in your prayers. Frances Tennyson will be laid to rest tomorrow, and her family really does need your prayers. This has been, of course, very difficult on them, but even though it's difficult on the family and on her friends and her church family, because we're all going to miss her so much, we do know that she is with Jesus now, and we are very grateful for her Christian witness throughout her life. And I would ask that you please keep all of the staff of Lawrence Hall Nursing Home in your prayers. They are having a very difficult time right now. The staff, the residents, and the residents' families are all having a hard time. So please keep them in your prayers. And if you have any other request that you know is okay to broadcast, please put those in the comments, and other people can see them there. Now, Every day I get questions about Phil and me, and we're fine. I've had mild symptoms, and Phil basically has had no real symptoms. He did test negative this week, but like Sharon, he is having to isolate for several days because of his exposure to me. I should be released from quarantine tomorrow if all goes well, and I think it will. So, but he will still have to be in isolation for a few more days. So we do thank y'all for all of the cards and the text and the calls and the food and the offers of food and especially the prayers. Please keep praying for Phil that he does remain negative, and that he won't have any symptoms or anything. Please continue to pray that this pandemic is lifted from all of us, from all of the world. They say that we're going into our third wave right now. So having been one who has experienced it, albeit mildly, it is disruptive. It does change your life, and we definitely need to be rid of this thing. I will write more about my experience with COVID in the newsletters this week, so watch for those. But now I invite you to pray with me. Holy God, we come back together this morning as a congregation, as a family of believers. We invite you to join us this morning to fill our hearts, not only, and I found that to be true, that we don't have much privacy as pastors. And technically I didn't have to tell people that that I had tested positive for COVID. That is something that's protected by but in our lives, are simply laced with confidentiality, with our health system, with our mental health system, with our finances, our voting, with our faith, with our family businesses. Everything we experience every day is just laced with the need for confidentiality. And there are hundreds of secrets that we keep in our daily lives that are perfectly legitimate to keep secret. Pastors have to keep a lot of secrets. There's not a day that goes by, I guess, that I don't have some part of your lives in my hands that I keep confidential, that I don't tell anybody. And fortunately, we are protected from having to reveal those secrets, much like doctors or attorneys are. And last Thursday, though, when we announced that we were going to close both churches because of a possible possible exposure, it was just the right thing to do. But I was stunned at the response I got. It was not a negative response for having to close necessarily. It's just that immediately I started getting calls and texts from people who were very concerned and who were asking questions. People wanted to know where the exposure came from, and I couldn't tell them. And then people wanted to know things like, well, where did that potential exposing person sit in the church? And I couldn't say. And then they wanted to know, well, did you notice if I talked with them? I couldn't say. All of that was confidential. But the thing is, everybody had such good reasons for needing to know. They really did need to know. It wasn't just out of curiosity. It was because of the way this affected their lives. And that was what was so stunning to me about how deep and wide and broad that this news affected people, and how very much this whole virus affects people in their daily lives. And we may think that we've adjusted to it, but in reality, when it hits closer to home, we haven't adjusted. I learned that there were health issues that some of you had that I knew nothing about that could be greatly and gravely affected by this virus. I learned that some of your jobs would be immediately impacted if you were exposed to this virus. I found out that there were travel plans that would have to be adjusted. Very important things that some of you had to do, that you had to be aware of being exposed to the virus. And there are other things that you talked to me about that I can't even hint at, because doing so would violate those rules of confidentiality. But it just amazed me how this potential exposure changed your lives. It hit so close to home, and it hit in a place where we thought we were safe. It hit where several of us had worked so hard to make it a safe place. And I think we were all stunned that it was not as safe as we thought it was. And we were devastated. Some people were angry. They said, who could have been so selfish to expose us? Who was not taking the proper precautions? Why wouldn't they take those seriously? Why would somebody risk other people's health and lives because they didn't want to take the necessary precautions? And others were afraid. They said, oh, I have tried to be so safe for so long, and then I go to church and I get exposed. And others said, oh no, was it through communion? But it wasn't. That was not the case. But this fear and this anger of possible exposure illustrate a verse that someone reminded me of the other day. The verse is Galatians 6:2. And in the Common English Bible it says, carry each other's burdens, carry each other's burdens, and so you will fulfill the law of Christ. Well, of course, the law of Christ is Christ's commandment to love one another as we love ourselves, or to love one another as Christ loves us. And if we carry each other's burdens, we're loving each other. Now, we'll never know for sure if that possible exposure last week or 2 weeks ago was a for sure exposure. But we do know that not all of our precautions were taken that should have been taken. Not everyone followed the guidelines, followed our rules, and in doing so, that increased everyone's potential for exposure. Now, I suspect that it was a case of someone thinking, oh, that'll never happen to me, or that someone just let their guard down. But in this day, at this time, this pandemic, we can't let our guard down when it comes to carrying each other's burdens. We can't take that chance of letting our guard down. This is too serious a situation. When it comes to COVID-19, when it comes to our world situation in 2020 and beyond, and when it comes to our situation right here in this community and the seriousness with which it's increasing every day, we must be diligent in carrying each other's burdens. We must take into consideration the good of the many. And if you're a Star Trek fan, you know Dr. Spock or Mr. Spock's views on that, the good of the many over the good of the few. But we must err on the side of caution when it comes to trying to keep each other safe, and we simply must endure the inconveniences that come with bearing each other's burdens. If that means wearing a mask, then wear a mask. If it means staying home, then stay home. If it means getting a test when you don't think you really want to be tested, then get the test. If it means isolating when you don't want to isolate or when you aren't even sure you've been exposed, isolate anyway. I don't want any of us ever to have on our conscience the guilt and the pain of having exposed somebody to something that could hurt them or kill them simply because it was inconvenient. Carrying each other's burdens is not difficult when we do it out of love. It may be inconvenient, but inconveniences aren't difficulties. Carrying each other's burdens is not difficult when done out of love. Just look at the burdens that Jesus carries for us out of love. I invite you to pray with me again. Holy God, we thank you for the burdens that you have carried, the burdens you carried to the cross, the burdens that you take upon yourself to carry for us every day if we would only let you. We thank you for the sacrifices you've made, for those inconveniences that you have made for us. Lord, help us to be compassionate for others. Help us to endure those inconveniences. Help us to love others as much as you love us, and to do what we need to do to end this pandemic in our lives. In Jesus' name. And now I give you this benediction. As you go out into the world this week, or maybe don't go out so much into the world this week, please be aware of how all of your actions affect other people and how all of your actions reflect Jesus Christ. And I pray that in all that you do it with a clear conscience, you do it with love in your heart, and you remain at peace. Amen.